Good morning. Welcome. We have our usual group of wonderful Sun City people or Bluffton people, and also our wonderful Texan and Noel. So we have a great crew as always. And we're going to be studying today the Omer. And at the end, we'll decide what we're going to be studying in the future, because I may have made a mistake that we're studying the Omer today, but I think I didn't write down exactly what we had talked about in the way I think we meant it to be written down. So
we were talking Yom HaShoah.
Yom HaShoah, that's what we were going to do today. We'll do that next week. That's what it was. It was Yom HaShoah this week, Yom Omer next week. I can talk a little bit about Yom HaShoah. I'm not prepared though, but I will mention there is a Yom HaShoah memorial event happening in both the Bluffton area and Savannah. They're both virtual. They happen to be one's at 6:30, one's at 7, so they'll be over each other. But please, everyone is invited to join in at least one of them and to participate in the Holocaust memorials. I don't know. There's probably I think the one in Bluffton's at 7, and the one here is at 6:30. But don't quote me on that. So we'll talk about Yom HaShoah next week. Then I'm a little bit more prepared, and we'll talk about the Omer today if that's okay. I'll take that as yes, it is okay. All right. So the Omer is a very interesting thing, and it's not something that is kept in the Reform movement very much. I think many of us know what it is, but we may not know a lot about it. So basically, the Omer is something that is found in the Torah. So this is a Torah holiday, but basically the Omer are the days in between Passover and Shavuot. So you start counting the Omer the day after Passover. Some would say the day after Passover Sabbath, the Sabbath after Passover. And then you count 49 days, and the 50th day is Shavuos. That's how the Sephardic and Ashkenazic do it. So if Passover starts on a Saturday night, as it did this year, that means you start counting the Omer on Sunday night. And then 49 days, and then the 50th day is Shavuos. There are sects, the Samaritans and Karaite, and we'll talk about why. If Passover starts on Saturday night, they start counting the Omer after the next Saturday night, because it's the Saturday in Passover. So they would actually have their Omer starting later. So of course their Shavuot services are going to be this year a week later, because basically in the text it says you will start counting the Omer after the holy day. The Ashkenazic and Sephardic say the holy day is the day of Passover. But the Karaites and Samaritans say the holy day is Shabbat. So they will start counting after the first Shabbat after Passover, which this year is at the very end of it. And so, again, theirs will be a little bit later than ours this year. So that's a very simple way of explaining, but let's go over what does Omer mean? Omer is basically just a measure, but it also means, in this case, the sacrifice of something to the temple. What do you sacrifice? Well, the thought is on Passover, you sacrifice barley, which is a simple product. And for Shavuos, you sacrifice wheat, which is not as simple. I do not know why barley is simple and wheat is not. Quite frankly, I love barley stew. I love soup with barley. But I eat wheat once in a while as well. So I'm good with each one. I do not know. Maybe it's simple because it's easier to harvest. Maybe it was considered, most likely, barley was considered a food for people who could not afford better foods, and wheat was a higher level food, kind of like variety here. But during this period, we celebrate something called the Omer, which is just the sacrifice of this product. So basically, it is not a holiday, but it is a period in between holidays that is mentioned in the Torah. So that is a conundrum, because if something's in the Torah, it should be a major holiday. But this is not a major holiday. This is the days in between major holidays. So what do you do with them? Why are you counting them? So that is a question. Why do you count 49 days, which is what? If you have 7 weeks, 7 times 7 is 49. Okay, we're going to go back to basic math. 7 times 7 is 49. Good. At least 2 of you got that one. So this is where we have to then begin the meaning, because there isn't a meaning that is specified other than you sacrifice something here and you sacrifice something here 50 days later. So that meant the middle part was left up to us to decide how to celebrate it or what it meant. Now, for us in the modern world, of course, we've done something unique, and we'll talk about next time, is we've added 3 holy days to the calendar during the Omer. We added Yom HaShoah, we added Yom HaTzmaut, Israel Independence Day, and Yom HaZikaron, Israel Memorial Day, which we'll talk maybe about next week. So that is something of a modern, but of course that's from the 20th century. Before that, we were asked to count these days. So basically, the edict is to count. So at night, you count 1, 2, and so forth. And there's a special prayer you say when you're counting, and that's how you do it. So it's a very simple thing. You just count at night, and you basically say, this is the first night of the Omer, this is the second night of the Omer, this is the third night, and that's all you really have to do. Basically, you say, Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshah mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Blessed are you, eternal God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with God's commands and commands us to count the Omer. Okay, this would be the 23rd day, say. Today is the 25th day, in which there is 3 weeks and 4 days of the Omer. And that's all you got to do. That's all there is you need to do traditionally. But as we know, we are Jews, and we like to create meaning and find lots of rules for stuff. So we have created rules and thoughts on the process of the Omer, and they have changed through the years. But I'm going to give you a basic synopsis of why the Omer is so important. What does Passover celebrate?
Our freedom.
One word. Anybody?
Independence.
Independence,
Freedom.
freedom, both of those. So Passover is the holiday of freedom, which is great. Freedom is important. We all want to be free. We want to be independent. But what is missing with freedom? I'm free to do anything I want. I can sit down and watch TV all day long, which is what I've done quite a bit of during the pandemic. Just started working Shtisel, which you guys, I think, recommended. Shtisels, I just started. It is engrossing, way too engrossing. I was very, very, very lucky to be able to go to bed at all last night because I started watching it. But freedom is only a step in being part of the Jewish community. So we escape Egypt, we get through the Red Sea. That is basic step 1. Freedom is needed, but it's just step 1, because step 2 is even more important, but you have to have step 1 to have step 2. Step 2 is purpose. What is the purpose of our lives? That is actually more important than freedom. It's just that you need freedom to have the purpose. It's hard to have purpose in life if I'm working 18 hours a day as a slave, and the only time I rest is when I sleep. So what represents purpose in this case? What did Shavuos become the holiday of? Celebrating the
10 Commandments.
10 Commandments or the Torah, depending on who you are. That is the purpose. That is the purpose of Judaism, is to follow the commandments and lead admirable lives. And that is something we all have the opportunity to do if we have freedom. So that is the synopsis of the combination. So Passover and Shavuos or Shavuot work in unison. You need both. You can't have Shavuos if you don't have the opportunity to practice those commandments. But if you only have Passover, that means life is meaningless. Yes, it's free, but I'm free to do nothing. I'm free to have no rules in life. It's just not really enough. So this means the 49 days in between have to have some sort of sense of meaning. So for some, counting the Omer is akin to counting up to something awesome. Like day 2, I'm one more day closer to this amazing thing. Day 47, I am only 2 days away, 3 days away. My math skills aren't that great. And so it's an idea that you're counting upwards to get to the receiving of the 10 Commandments or the Torah. It is a momentous occasion. However, the Omer is not designated a holiday, a holy day. Why is the Omer not designated a holy day, holy time? First of all, it's just too darn long. I mean, is that what you said, Jeff? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, I said that.
All right. He is the man. A holy day in Judaism is a day where you don't work. You don't travel. Most people, if you haven't retired like me, cannot take 50 days off. I know because I've asked. And you guys have all said no to me in unison. But next year, hopefully you will step forward and say the rabbi deserves 49 days off during the Omer. And I will say, thank you, I appreciate it. And I will see you in 7 weeks. But that is the reason. So we have to decide what we're going to do during this time period. So what are some of the things that led us to believe we need to do what? Okay, so what do we believe about this? So the counting of the Omer for some has become a time of mourning. Even as we're stepping towards the excitement of Shavuos, it has become for some a time of mourning. Why is it a time of mourning? Well, it was then later added that some terrible things happened during the Omer. A plague killed 24,000 of Rabbi Akiva's students. All of them were killed. Bar Kokhba revolt. All these people were killed or plagued during this great revolt. So, in other words, God or let terrible things happen or terrible things happen during this period. Later rabbis would say the Crusades were at a zenith, that the pogroms, that the blood libels. That's why we put Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron during this time period, because it's a semi-mourning time period. You ask, why then did we put Yom HaTzvaut, Israel Independence Day? Well, because Israel decided to put Israeli Mourning Day and Israel Independence Day one right after the other. So that was that. But this is why Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron were put during this time, because they're semi-mourning, because we honor the memory of all these terrible things that happened. So that is one. Others might say otherwise. Some view it less so, but there's also debate. The Ashkenazim believe the entire 49-day period is a time of half mourning. The Sephardim believe only the first 32 days is a time of mourning. What is the reason for this difference? In the middle, not in the middle, during the Omer, we have one day set apart that is a special day. You may have heard the phrase Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, the log just is 2 letters. The the Lamed and the Gimel that in Hebrew represent the number 33. So it's the 33rd day of the Omer. This is considered the day of celebration during the Omer, where you stop mourning for this day if you're Ashkenazic. And what don't you do if you're mourning? What are the things you don't do when you're mourning?
Shave,
Anybody?
shave,
What are the
shave, cut your hair,
one more? Say it louder, Larry.
shave,
Don't
bathe,
shave. What else?
cut your hair,
Don't cut your hair.
maybe not even look in the mirror.
Don't look in the mirror. Although for me, that's very easy. That's a bonus. You don't go to weddings. You don't go to parties. You don't dance. You don't listen to music. There are all of these things that you can do during this period to make it a semi-mourning phase, but you still go to work because obviously you got to make a living. However, on the 33rd day of the Omer, it is a day of respite. It is a day when you are allowed to celebrate. Why? Because some would say Rabbi Akiva began teaching the 5 greatest students of the next generation. A lot of people say this is a momentous day where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai finally found freedom. Does everybody know the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? He's considered the person who wrote the Zohar, and then it was lost for 1,000, 11, 1,200 years. He's the person who hid in a cave during the Bar Kokhba Revolution. And he hid in the cave for like 13 years. And while he was there, had all these mystical revelations. He survived because of a magical tree, basically, that was outside. And he is his son who spoke directly to God and heard that the Roman emperor had died and that all the decrees about killing the Jews had stopped, were abolished, and now they could come out. So Shimon Bar Yochai is kind of the great-grandfather of mystical Judaism. Did he really write the Zohar? I mean, probably not, obviously. A book that's hidden for 1,300 years or 1,500 years is hard. The guy who, I just forgot his name, the guy who found the book is probably the guy who wrote it. So this day is a day where you can celebrate. So guess what is the most expensive day probably of the year to rent a wedding venue in Israel? Lag BaOmer, because you're waiting this whole time, and it's the only day during this period. Why is that important? Because what period does it take? It's taking April, May. What are those? And maybe late March. What types of days are those? Those are the best days to get married. Why? Because it's spring, and Israel's beautiful in the spring, and it's really hot in the summer and rainy. Plus, Passover is the moment we say the prayer for the dew, meaning the prayer for, thank you, Stuart, is Rabbi Moses de Leon. The prayer for the dew is said after Passover begins. What does that mean? It means the end of raining season. So from Sukkot to Passover is raining season. So it's hard to get married when it might rain. And then from Passover to Shavuos is the Omer. So that means the time you really can get married is June, July, August, which is so everybody really wants to get married if you're religious on Lag BaOmer. So even the conservative movement and some in the reform movement won't do weddings or bar mitzvahs even. Obviously, baby namings, of course, are fine because of the Omer. And so it's a very limiting thing. So this is what the Omer has become, this time of semi-mourning as we go from freedom to revelation. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry about that. So any questions or thoughts so far?
I have a
Stuart.
question, which it may not be pertinent to this conversation, but you brought up in your sermon, I think on Saturday, something about the fact that the mitzvahs that you were not, the person in his lifetime was, or commandments was not able to fulfill, could be fulfilled by others spiritually, as they're moving, as they're saying the prayers and remembering that person. And, it seemed like it was this ladder of events, that which I kind of think of more of the Hindu religion, we're moving toward nirvana and things
Right.
like this. Is there the same sense here? And I hadn't heard that before, that, that we're fulfilling a mitzvah, but the mitzvah is helping the deceased get to a higher level. Is the same kind of thing here? Is the Omer kind of a cumulative thing in that, almost like lighting the Hanukkah candles, the whole idea of, light them all at once or one at a time to show increasing light. In other words, if you do the first week, but maybe you don't do the past, the next few, is there some sort of a cumulative effect here of getting it to the next level? But it's not, it doesn't sound like it's preparing us to accept the 10 commandments. It's really, you're saying it's a mourning period more than a preparation. It's not like the period before Yom Kippur.
It is both. That's a very good way of analyzing it. It is both considered a day of semi-mourning, but also a day of excitement, days that the excitement accumulates over time as you get closer and closer. Using a birthday is a good example. A little kid, it's 5 more days to my birthday. It's 4 more days to my birthday. It's that each day is a little bit more exciting. I don't know if it's building on each other or just the days are better and better. But yeah, it is very much like that. That is what the mystics, and we'll talk about that in a second, people believe that you are approaching that time. But even so, you're during a time of mourning as you honor the memory. It's almost, as so often is the case, there's a dualism to this time. The mourning and excitement are coming at the same time. And that's one of the reasons you only count the Omer at night. So you're going to be excited. The Omer's coming, and then the day you kind of a little bit more mourning. We'll go with Stuart and Michael.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts and questions. But the first one's a question. Often in English, Shavuot becomes expressed as Pentecost. Any idea where that term came from?
Where Pentecost came from? Well, I think Pentecost is based on the number 5, right? And so for 50th day, I think, is where it came from probably. Shavuos means weeks because you count 7 weeks to get to it. It's irony because it's called Shavuos and it only really lasts 1 day, or that asks for some 2, whereas Pesach does last for a week, but it's just one of those funny ironies. But that's why I believe Pentecost came from the 55 days, but I could be wrong if anybody knows otherwise.
I don't know, because I was wondering, because the Christian holiday Pentecost comes in that period, but that's after 40 days, so I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah, we'd have to look that up. That's a good question.
So that's 1. 2. It seems to me that if the explanation for counting the Omer is this idea of counting down until something good is going to happen, that would imply that the Jewish people knew the Torah was going to be given at the end of this period of time. But I don't see any evidence of that in Torah.
Well, that is a good question. Is this posthumously created? It is or it isn't, because again, remember the Torah is non-linear, because in the Torah, it specifically says, and I don't have that text, that you will count 7 times 7 weeks from this holiday to the next. So when they start describing the holidays, they are telling you what they are. Now, did they have the holiday first and then they're describing it, or are they describing it and then having the holiday? That is dependent on your point of view, because not everybody believes it's linear. I could be certainly writing down, we celebrated this holiday, but we already did it once, or I could write it down and say, we always celebrate this holiday, meaning we're going to start now. So that is, were they counting down 7 times 7 during the exact moment when they were living through this? That I don't know. You know, you can, some say yes, some say well, no. In other words, as you aptly said, we got across the deserts. Do we start counting? And we got across the sea. Do we start counting now 49 days, and then the 50th we're going to get the Torah? Did they know this was coming? It does say they did, but we don't know exactly if they were doing this counting or not. That's a good point. Again, there's always the question of how much was known of the future in the head of Moses. How much was God giving to the people about the future, and how much was God not? So it is a question. More traditional people would probably say yes, they were counting because they knew it was coming, but not everybody would. And the third, you have a third one?
No, let Michael go.
It's okay, Stuart.
Well, I'll come after.
Okay. I might have taken a mental timeout, but, you mentioned.
That was like
Rabbi
1978
Akiva
for
having,
me.
New students, but I don't remember you saying why the 33rd day of the Omer. It's not halfway. It's not towards the end. Why the 33rd day?
So that's a good question. Why was 33 taken? Was it decided beforehand? The 33rd day is we're just choosing the 33rd day because we like the sound of it? Or was it chosen because I know for sure that this happened on the 33rd day in the past? That is a great question. It's like the chicken or the egg. I do not know. 33rd obviously sounds very, very much like the best midway point. If you go 7, 7, 3, 3, together they add to 10. You can't say 3.5, 3.5. It doesn't sound the same. So even though 33 is more than halfway, it is a round number, kind of like 7, 7. So there's a lot of numerology involved. And so I did not know the numerology of that. I'll have to look that up. But I do not know. Let's look that up. If anybody have to see why it was the 33rd day. See if there's any reasonable answer.
31 is a prime number. Why not do that? Yeah.
I think it has something to do with the sounding. Let's see. Let's see. I'll have to look that up later. I do not remember why it's the 33rd day. Let's see here. It's nothing in the Torah about it. Okay, so I'll have to look it up. I don't know why the 33rd day. It's a good question. I probably should know that. You know what? I do know it. I'm just not telling you. So we'll look up. I think it's like a post Gaonim, probably in the 8th, 9th, 10th century is where they came up with the 33rd day, because it's not an old tradition. It's old, but it's not 2,000 years old. All right. Any other questions about it? Jeff, I'm sorry. Okay, so Stuart.
All right. I don't know how familiar you are with the Christian Testament, but there is a very odd set of coincidences between this whole story about the writing of the Zohar and the book of Revelations, which is the last book in the Christian Testament. Revelation's a very off-the-wall kind of book, very mystical, very predictive, as is the Zohar. Both allegedly written about the both same time,
Right,
both written by men who were in caves for a very extended period of time because they were hiding from Roman authorities. So that whole thing, I've got to believe that whole relationship is much more than coincidental. Which came first? That's subject for a whole other course.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Which came first? Revelations is written probably in the into the first century, second century. That's the same time period where
It's dated around 90.
Shimon Bar Yochai would have been a little bit later. 90 though is almost the exact year they think the Torah was written, or at least finished. Not finished being written, but canonized. So we take things from each other. We also don't know. There's previous stories of people living in caves who had mystical experiences. Buddhism as well. I mean, it could have been they're both based on a story that came before that we no longer have. And so, or it could be we just based ours on the story of Revelations, or they based it on our story. It's impossible, but you're right. We mimic each other. A lot of the stories we have in the Torah, we know other cultures that had similar stories that predate us. Most obviously, creation story of the flood. I mean, these are very old stories that predate us. So, yeah, I think it's probably very, very possible or almost probable, but there's some connection there. All right, so any other questions before we go on? Now, the Sephardim, of course, for their own reasons, only believe it's a mourning period, a semi-mourning period to Lag BaOmer. So if you're Sephardic, the 33rd day to the 49th day, you can celebrate. Again, the Ashkenazic tend to have more strict rules on everything. Plus, the Ashkenazic obviously were living more isolated lives. It didn't affect them as much. The Sephardim were living in the world, and so they probably needed to have they'd be more out there in the world. So basically, that's how so if you see somebody who's religious celebrating on the 37th day, they're most likely Sephardic. Okay. So now there are other things that go on where specifically on the 33rd day on Lag BaOmer, you shave, you have weddings, you go to parties, celebrations, all that jazz. But we also have to understand that 7 times 7 can't help but lead us into some sort of mystical interpretation. I mean, 7 is the prime number. I mean, you go play craps, it's 7. I mean, 7 is the prime number, and we're using 7 twice. And it's also 7 days of the week, 7 days of creation. So this, of course, leads to the Sfirot, which, of course, we talked about the Sfirot, right? The mystical levels in between us and God, the 10 Sfirot. I think we talked about it. We talked about it at a previous time period about there's, 10 levels between us and God. Some would say the 10th is God, the first is us, and that we can get to certain levels to God. It is believed that the highest 3 levels, human beings can't reach. So if there's 10 levels to God, human beings can get to 7. That's the best of the best of us. That is Stuart and Jane and none of the rest of us. They can get to the 7th level. So obviously, it leads into great mystical interpretation. Now, remember, the Omer comes before mysticism. 7 times 7 is in the Torah, so it is at the very least a very old teaching. Certainly before the 1st century CE, could probably going back to the 9th, 8th, or 7th century BCE. So this 7 times 7 has been a spiritual number or an important number for a very long time. And so there is no way that it could not become part of the mystical thoughts of Kabbalah when you have 7 times 7. And so there is also obviously a way that we try and connect this to the Sfirot, to these 7 levels that humans can achieve. And so each 7 of the 7 days is giving one of these levels. So level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you start again. Sunday, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sunday, level 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously, 7 is the Sabbath. So these numbers all fit perfectly. So what are the levels? Just going through, the first day is loving kindness, chesed, then Gevurah, strength or might, Tiferet, beauty, Netzach, victory, Hod, acknowledgement, Yesod, which is the foundation, and Malchut, kingdom. So each day is connected in some way to those levels, and there are special readings and things you can do for them. And so we also have to remember that this is a semi-mournful time period. It is not the same as mourning, like if you've lost someone you love. That is much more strenuous. There's nothing about limitations to what you can wear, what you can eat, where you can go out, services you have to miss. None of those limitations during this time period, unless you put it on yourself. Like there's obviously going to be certain foods people eat depending on your culture, but there's none of these, you're in mourning, people tear ribbons and all that kind of stuff. Larry.
So just getting back to your sermon of last Saturday, then, is that what you were kind of alluding to, that supposing a person has passed away and has only reached, we don't know what level they've reached, let's say the third, fourth level, that then the person that is carrying on their spirit basically can help them advance from the third to the fourth to the fifth and so on? Is that kind of the message that you were giving us on Saturday?
Very much so. So now you got to remember, mysticism is not one belief. There's a lot of mystical beliefs. And one of the beliefs is that we, especially children for parents, but it can be for siblings and for children as well. But the way I live my life can help you in the next life. And that is one of the mystical beliefs of how we stay connected. Not everybody believes that. But certainly if you add that to the Sfirot, it seems very obvious that somebody might be able to help somebody get to the next level in Sfirot, get closer to God. So yes, there are those who view that, and you can put all these things together. There are a lot who don't. So it just depends on your viewpoint. But again, mysticism is a very interesting discipline that some people love, others do not. But there's no rule in Judaism that says you have to be a mystic. There's no rule in Judaism that says you have to read the Zohar or you have to believe in the Sfirot. That is a whole different discipline. But yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Larry listened to my sermon. He is my favorite person today. He gets double gold stars. Right? We'll give you 7 gold stars representing the Sfirot, the 7 times 7. You know what? I'm giving you 49 gold stars. How's that?
Well, I have another question then.
Yeah.
Your favorite subject today. You said there are 10 levels, but we can't get past level 7.
Right.
So why establish levels 8, 9, and 10?
That's a good point. I think there are other beings that can reach those levels besides human beings. And also there's so many aspects to God. And plus the number 10 is a very meaningful number for Judaism. So if you have 10 levels and you can only reach 7, you're using 2 of the most important, if not the most important, mystical numbers in one belief system, 10 and 7. And I think we'd all agree that 10 and 7 are used all the time. And so this, plus the idea that there is, godly levels that we can't come close to, that it's not just one level. I mean, the idea is there are many things out there we don't understand. But that's a good question. Why don't we just have 7 levels to God? It's probably a mixture of all of that. And there's also a belief that everyone can get to the first level. Well, really, everybody can get to the second level. Some would say the first level is us, like we're right here, there already. So there are some beliefs that everyone can get to a second level, and some more modern beliefs that you can't. All right, I answered all the questions. Now, if you go to an Orthodox or conservative synagogue, we do not count the Omer here. It's just not something we do, but you will hear them every night count the Omer. If they forget, then you can do it another day. You just don't need to say the prayer, basically. So the Omer kind of mimics a little bit Tisha B'Av, which of course is the 9th of Av, which is the day the temples were destroyed, and that a lot of bad things were put there. Whereas Tisha B'Av is a day of full mourning, even though it is not a rest day. This is kind of like a semi-mourning day. So any other questions? And next week we'll do Yom HaShoah, and then the week after we can do Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut if you'd like. But I wanted to see what else, because I did not have a list of anything we're doing in the future. So I wanted to make sure I get that list set before we conclude today, because this is the last one I have. So next week we'll do Yom HaShoah. Again, that is this. Yom HaShoah starts this Wednesday night, but most celebrations will be Thursday night. And we'll do that next. And if you want, we'll do Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut the next week. Has anybody been in Israel for either one of those?
Yes, Rabbi, we have.
All right.
Lessons from the holiday.
And
So-
and Flossie wanted to say her suggestion was lessons from the Holocaust for the holiday.
Okay, so do that, lessons from the Holocaust. Perfect. Doing a sermon on that sort of this weekend. All right, perfect. So we'll do that. Obviously, you can do many weeks on the Holocaust also. That is something that we can certainly do a long period of time with. You could even bring in people if you wanted, but that's up to you guys. Any other thoughts on things we should be learning, Larry?
Not on thoughts we should be learning, but one question that came up, I guess it was a while back, I had a conversation with the Chabad rabbi here, and about when the Torah actually came into existence. And I was trying to find that in the book here, and in the book, and this happens to be the New English version of the Bible, the English version, the St. James version. And I think it's someplace in the book of Exodus, which is around Exodus 3 and 4, like verses 13 and 14. And it said something in there which he read to me from his book of Exodus, which said that Moses went to the elders and consulted the Torah. This is prior to the Exodus now, prior to Mount Sinai. And I had never seen that before, which implied, not implied, but it stated, at least in his book, in his version of the book of Exodus, that the Torah has been in existence prior to the Mount Sinai. And I was wondering if you've seen that. I looked at it in this version of the Bible, and it doesn't say that. It says that Moses went to the elders, but it omits the words, that they consulted the Torah. Have you ever
Well,
heard
the word Torah means teaching, and we know the word is used as the Torah a couple times. I think that, so I don't remember if the word Torah is used there. That may have been added, but if you're more traditional, you believe Moses got the whole Torah at Mount Sinai. Some might think he had it beforehand. And so also, remember, it's not linear. So when he's down the mountain, he may have already gone up and come down, because he's up and down like an elevator. He's up and down all the time. So if it's not linear, but yes, there is a belief in the traditional world that Moses got the entire Torah verbatim, and he wrote it down there. So including maybe even the future, because obviously he dies. So he'd have to write that down. Some would say that Joshua wrote the last part of after Moses died. So
even that Moses got the Torah? It was like the people of Israel already had the Torah
Yeah.
while they were in Egypt. is what
yeah, and that may be, that's a belief by some. And also the Talmud, they believe the entire Talmud was there as well. That was only not written down. That was passed by word of mouth for, 1,500 years or 2,000 years. So it depends what your belief is. Before I go to, that's an interesting difference when we come to Shavuos. Because on Shavuos, you read the 10 Commandments. That's the reading. So in the more liberal world, you stand during the reading of the 10 Commandments. Just like you stand when you read the 10 Commandments when it actually is read. In the Orthodox world, they have decided they're not standing anymore, they sit down. Why do they sit down? They've decided to sit down because they don't want to acknowledge that it was just the 10 commandments Moses got. They believe Moses got the entire Torah, not just the 10 commandments. So they think that when we stand up, it means we believe that Moses only got the 10 commandments. Although it does say he got all these other ones as well. So this is one of the theories of the differences. Stuart.
I think, it's addressed primarily to Larry. As my understanding is that on Shavuot, the Torah wasn't written. The Torah was being given at that time. The Orthodox belief really is that the Torah may very well have existed before creation, and creation came out of Torah. That's what they were in the beginning, and the first thing was Torah. Very often, the newer texts are not translating Bereshit as in the beginning, but rather at the beginning of the creation of the world, implying that there was a whole bunch of other stuff, including God and Torah, before the world was created, not that the creation of the world was the start of everything.
Yeah, and that's one of the beliefs.
Yeah, what I was surprised at was when he took out his version of the book of Exodus and he showed me the word Torah in the book of Exodus prior to, when Moses is first given this commandment by God, and he's told to consult the Israelites, the elders of Israel, and they consulted the elders of Israel concerning the Torah.
There's only one book of Exodus. The others are all
That was my
translation.
impression, that there was only one book and we all had the same book. And here I guess I could see it in a different version, let's say, in an interpretation version.
We have to remember we also can be considered anachronistically using the word in a different way than they did. Torah back then may have been just teaching.
Yeah, I was curious if the word is actually there in
the word Torah is used a couple times in the Torah. Yes.
Oh, it is prior to.
I don't remember if it's prior to that. It's definitely used in Deuteronomy, and I don't remember if the word Torah is used in Exodus in that version, but it could be, because it's it's not an uncommon thing.
What was your memory of where it was, Larry?
I thought it was around Exodus chapter 3, like verse 13 and thereabouts.
Okay. Let's see, it looks like it's in Leviticus. Let's see here.
Well, I don't want to belabor this thing right now. I did have one other thought that I did want to make, and I sent it to everybody this morning. We have friends at Long Beach Island in New Jersey here, and she's the president of the congregation there. And through the Jewish National Fund, they have a 1-week virtual bus tour of Israel.
I saw that.
You saw that. And
I saw your email.
Take a look at the itinerary, and it looks like it's quite interesting. They have a guide who is a virtual guide, and he takes you to different places. It's a different suggestion. So, we could make suggestions if we wanted to do it, through Mikveh Israel. They take 25 people maximum. It's $50 per screen, not per person, per screen. So a family could go on, because they want it to be like a bus so that everybody could see all 25 people. Obviously, he cuts in and he talks when he shares the screen, and he takes you to, whatever places you would want to in Israel for the day. And then afterwards, they have basically an hour of what's called Q&A discussion about what you've seen and what you want to go see the next day. And it sort of would be.
That sounds great.
I don't know how we would approach this, but the JNF is the founder of it, or the suggester of it. I could get this. They're doing it this week. The people in Long Beach Island.
I'd send the information out, because we thought about doing something similar, so I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, because if we wanted to do it with 25 people, she said it's sold out in her congregation.
We could set it up ourselves and not go with them.
We would set it up as our bus tour for ourselves.
And it's $50 a day. So
$50 total for the entire 5 days. Friday is a shortened day.
That might be interesting. Yeah, we'll just send out, maybe too late to get that, the 25 people in 2 days, but if they do it again, especially, or,
Oh, no. We could schedule it at our own time. In other words.
oh, okay. So because they've already done it, it's already pre-done.
Yeah, if you wanted to do it, just as a family group with only 10 people, they would do it, or.
Let me-
if you wanted to
Let me
do-
check. That may be a good idea.
Just take a look at the itinerary that she had set up there.
Did you
and,
send me that? I know you sent me the email.
I think there's an attachment there that says itinerary.
Okay, good. And as
If I didn't, I'll send it to you again.
perfect. And as for the word Torah, it is once found in the book of Exodus. So it is once in the Exodus, mostly in Deuteronomy. I did find one place. So that was probably it. So I knew it was in the Torah. I knew it was in Deuteronomy, but there's one time it is in Exodus.
Oh. Do you know
So
if it's before Mount Sinai or after in the book of
well,
Exodus?
again, it depends if you count. If you count it as being linear, step by step, it's I think before.
Yeah, I think that's what he was alluding
Yeah.
to. It really surprised me. Yeah.
It's in Exodus 12:49. That's the first one.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Just an unusual little, backstory.
Yeah.
To hunt down. Yeah.
It is. It's really interesting. All right. Always a pleasure. So next week we're going to talk about Yom HaShoah. Again, I remind everyone there are free programs Thursday night in Bluffton and in Savannah. We do it with the Federation. The Bluffton program seemed like a really good one. They sent it to me. Does everybody have access to both of those?
Is the Bluffton program the one that's done by the Shalom Club here?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's indoors, unfortunately. It's a
Yeah.
different call, and that was part of the.
Oh, they're doing it live indoors?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Ours are the ones Savannah's
Yeah.
doing it virtual.
No, you can watch it on YouTube though.
Oh, probably, yeah, you could watch
You know,
it.
Larry, you don't even need to register.
Yeah,
Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody.
okay.
I look forward to it.
We should have a session on Stissel.
That would be fun. That would be great. So
That would
I'm
be
I'm
fun.
only finished 3 episodes, so I'm still new to it.
You're still in
Well,
season
the-
one?
the-
You're
The,
season-
the last season is I've watched 5 of the episodes of the last season, which just came out, and it's very, very different. You really need to watch the first 2 seasons too.
I know that the daughter is Shira Haas, who was in that other movie.
Yes.
She doesn't look that different as a little kid than she does as an
Yes.
adult, but she's so tiny. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
But thanks for recommending it. I really enjoyed it.
Good.
So it's like one of the 3 or 4 shows I'm watching now, trying to get out of this only watching sci-fi stuff. So I'm watching sci-fi stuff and some Jewish stuff. That's pretty much it. All right, guys, stay safe. Thanks
Be
again, as
safe.
always.
Thank you.
And you
Bye-bye.
have a good one. I'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Rabbi.
Hey, Jeff, I'll see you later. Bye.